everyone. Yes, I'm the Executive Director of Morgan Autism Center. We're actually almost literally behind this building in a way. We're off Kersey. If you go down Meridian and hang a left at the Kentucky Fried Chicken there, we purchased the property that was formerly owned by the Sisters of the Holy Family. So we bought that in 2016. I did provide a PowerPoint here, but I'm going to stay really loose on the PowerPoint, and I'd rather just talk about autism. But first I'll tell you about our program. So we are a school. We have two programs that we run on our site here in Willow. One is we have a school program. That school program serves individuals aged 5 to 22 years old, all the way up to 22. And these kids are referred to us by public school districts, essentially. So these are kids who have a diagnosis, obviously, of autism and have landed in their public school districts. And for one reason or another, it's not enough for that child, right? So they need an extra level of support that the district is unable to provide. 90% of my students have no verbal language whatsoever. Huge challenges with social behavior, emotional regulation, those kinds of things. The program is designed to really serve people on the spectrum who need that highest level of care. And for those of you who know someone with autism, you know it's a spectrum, right? So that on one end of that spectrum, I think about it like a number line, right? On one end of that spectrum, you have kids and adults like the ones I serve who kind of need help with everything that we take for granted every day, right? And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have people who are super capable and may do, higher than grade level schoolwork and may be really capable in many, many ways, but maybe have some challenges with social behavior or keeping relationships, those kinds of things, right? So again, we serve those kids who are at the highest need. The kids are essentially referred to us by the public school districts. We serve kids from 33 different school districts all over the Bay Area. We have kids coming to us from Half Moon Bay and San Mateo and Morgan Hill and East Bay. And so these are most of the kids who are diagnosed get to be served in their districts. The kids we serve need something else, right? So some of them are traveling great distances to us on a daily basis. The second program we have, I'll say one more thing about the school program. We're not a high school diploma track kind of program. The kids we serve have such big challenges that we're really teaching them functional skills. How to use the bathroom, how to put their things away, how to communicate. And communication is a huge one, right? Because if you're completely nonverbal, well, what do, right? So most of our students have some sort of technology solution, like an iPad with a picture-based software on it, where they can point to the things that they want, right? So we teach them that very basic communication. So we're what's called a functional skills program. These are not high school diploma track kids. Sometimes we'll get a kid who has higher academic skills, but is maybe really challenged behaviorally. And every once in a while, we'll take one of those kids because we think we can stabilize them. And then our goal would be to push them back to the school district where they can access that higher level of academic work and so on. Most families, when they come to us, they want to stay with us forever because it's a one-to-one program. So every student who's at our school has a teacher with them all day, every day, right? It's a super high resource-intensive kind of program. We also have an adult program.
Can I ask a question first about that
please,
program?
stop me anytime.
How is that? How are you funded? Are you getting any federal?
Yeah, so we get to build a district. So when a district thank you, that's a really great thing to talk about, right? Because people want to know. We are a nonprofit. However, we are able to bill for services for our school program, certainly. And so we do have to do fundraising every year. Most of our fundraising is to not really directed at the school program per se, but our adult program. So our adult program serves individuals 22 and older.
And you aren't getting any money from the school districts for those individuals?
No, that becomes state funded.
Yeah.
And it's through the regional centers, if you're familiar with that. So they set the rate for how much they're going to pay us for that. And we always fall short on that. They pay us about $85, $90 per day to serve an adult on our campus. It falls way short of our costs. But the mission is still the mission, and there's a need for this adult programming. So we fundraise to make up the difference.
So you say adults, but you said you stop at 22, 23. What?
22 to 63. So once they graduate from our school program, they become eligible to be in our adult program.
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
So we have some individual. We've been around since 1969. I've been there since 1994, almost 30 years now. So you get to know these individuals over the course of decades sometimes. The adult program, because the funding source changes, we can't afford to do a one-to-one program. There's just no way to make that work. Even when we're fundraising, we still have to trim that down a little bit. So it's 3, we call them clients instead of students when they become adults. 3 clients for every staff member. It's still a very highly supportive program for them, but it's not quite at the level that our school students receive. Make sense to everyone? Any questions?
Yes. How many kids are in the program?
Oh, thanks, yeah. Our max for kids is 68. We're right now at 55, and we're at 55 really because we've had a couple graduating classes through the pandemic and no way to bring these new students on. We're finally able to go out and screen kids and bring them on our campus. So we'll get back up to 68 at some point in the near future.
And how many additional that aren't served? Like if there's 68 that serve you, how many in the county then don't get served?
So all these kids who are referred to our program, they're typically in some kind of program. It may not be a program that's meeting all their needs, but they are in some kind of a program. So we have a referral list that's probably 40 or 50 deep. That's just where we live. You know, there's a lot of people who want to be in that in our program, but we can't serve them all. One of the things we do to have a little bit further reach, because we just have a max capacity. We're just a school, right? We can't just keep on serving everybody, right? Yeah, we do some consultant work with school districts. We implemented our model. We have our own model for working with kids that we've implemented at San Jose Unified for about 10 years. They're up and running and they're doing their own thing now, but we're now doing that in Santa Cruz County. So that gives us a little further reach in that regard. Adult program, so 68 students, 50 adults on our campus. So right around 120 when we're at max capacity. Yeah. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about how people with autism, how they're challenged in some ways, or do you feel like you have that?
I have one question.
Yeah.
Are many of your adults hold down full-time jobs?
No, not at all. So again, these are individuals who have really big challenges. Our adult program does do a lot of like volunteer work in the community. So with our staff, they'll go out in the community and do something at Hidden Villa, or they'll participate in classes at San Jose State University, or they'll do these different community kinds of activities. But to hold a job for our clients with the challenges that they have is really difficult.
Because you're at the far end of the spectrum.
That's right. There are many people on the spectrum who are higher functioning, who are able to land a job and hold on to a job and that kind of thing. We do have one relationship with Raderman. I don't know if anyone knows the Raderman family or Raderman family. These folks have had a relationship with us for many years. They own a company that makes like oxygen tanks and things like that, and they actually will send us parts to our campus. And we have a few individuals who get a paycheck from putting these parts together, kind of at their own, if they want to do that, and they comfort. Yeah, it's all about comfort zone and making sure they're feeling supported. So some of our folks do have a job, but it's a kind of like a sheltered workshop sort of situation. Yeah.
Could you talk about the spectrum?
Sure.
Let's see, gosh, I'm trying to make my question narrow, but could you talk about the spectrum and understand like how we came up with it and how they're diagnosed, right? Because it's a huge thing. I don't remember when I grew up that there was a lot of people,
both.
right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden this has exploded,
yeah.
and I'm just really curious from your perspective, you know, what is it and
What happened and
what
how
happens
we
and why
got
is it?
here. Yeah.
And, right, if
Yeah.
you could just kind of give a little background.
I'll do my best.
Thank you.
So people with autism typically are impacted in several areas. One is their social skills, right? So they may have challenges with things like, we say they are challenged by understanding the hidden social curriculum. So, or understanding these social rules that you and I figure out really quickly in our lives just by participating. We're able to like, oh, I see the social rule here, and I can apply that social rule in a whole bunch of different contexts. Can I give you an example of that? All right, you sir, what's your name?
Ken.
Come on up, Ken.
Oh, yeah.
He's a good one.
I am on the spectrum.
Wait,
so
I was gonna say, there's a diagnosis coming.
Yeah.
Self-diagnosed.
So we're gonna do kind of a fun example of social skills and how that might play out, but then I'm gonna talk about how those challenges can lead to some pretty big mistakes that can be problematic for an individual on the spectrum. So it's Ken. Okay, Ken, we're gonna pretend that Ken is at a baseball game. He's in the men's bathroom and he's standing at a urinal in the men's bathroom, okay? And we're at a baseball game with 30 urinals. If you're a woman and have never been in a men's bathroom, at a baseball game, you might be in a bathroom with 30 urinals, right? For some reason, Ken has gone to the bathroom at just the right time when there's no one but Ken in the bathroom. And he's standing on the last urinal in the room, right? And is it Greg?
Greg.
So Greg also has to go to the bathroom, and the first urinal in the bathroom is here. So Greg, stand up and show me which urinal you're going to use.
He sits
Oh,
down.
well, of course, the rule is you go as far away as you can.
He sits down.
That's
when
right.
As privately as possible.
So that's the rule, right? That's the social rule.
Yeah.
Any man in here ever been taught that rule? The answer is no.
No. That's social.
Right? You've not been taught that rule because you understand personal space, right? And you figured out that I'm going to apply that personal space rule in every situation that I'm in. No one has to tell me about it, right? I've got it figured out. Greg, you can have a seat. Can you stay right there? There are tons of reasons why I might end up standing next to Ken at a urinal, right? What are the reasons, guys?
Crowd, they're full. Size of crowd.
Size of crowd, yeah, they're full, they're filthy, they're overflowing, whatever the reason is. I'm gonna wait till that food is delivered.
But if I'm
No, keep going.
spectrum, I come stand next to you because I'm modeling myself as a,
Hold on,
yeah?
ask questions after I'm done. So I might end up standing next to Ken at the urinal, right? And it's okay to do so, right? But if I decide I want to comment on the baseball game to Ken, there's still social rules that I'm supposed to follow, right? What's the rule, guys? If I'm going to talk to Ken at the urinal, what's the rule?
Eyes straight.
Eyes straight ahead, right? If I turn to look at Ken while we're both using the urinal, he's going to feel uncomfortable, right? So again, a social rule that we all know and no one has taught us, right?
Okay, but even children that are young, we are taught things, right? I understand that they're picking up things, but why would it be difficult for an autistic person if you explain it to them? Like,
So that's a great question, and quite often a person with autism can learn a social rule in a particular situation. The problem is applying it to all situations.
oh, I see.
Right? And so they'll learn the specific situation and apply that rule in the bathroom. Maybe they'll learn that rule. But they may not tune into the personal space rule when they're talking to a police officer and see their badge and decide it looks really cool and reach in and touch. Yeah, right. So a person with autism may have to learn over and over and over all these personal space rules. Ken has figured it out all by himself and can apply it in every situation, just about every situation. Yeah, we all break rules, right? Don't get me wrong.
That makes sense.
So Ken, you can have a seat. You did a great job.
You did a great job.
I feel like you did a really good job standing.
Tuck your pants, tuck your shirt in. Just a pride.
I do talk
So-
to you.
Wash your hands.
But Ken, do you have a question for me?
No, but okay, so I can see that. I have a sister with special needs, and she's, I can see where I would, if I don't know the social norms, I may, like another child, my son would be definitely afraid of someone seeing his wiener because he's 14, right? But if you're like 7 or 8 or whatever, you may go stand up next to someone to kind of model their behavior. Okay, I'm fine. This is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, look, when we're young, certainly we make those mistakes, but usually over time we kind of pick up on those social rules and apply them. I have students at my school who, and I'm sure there's gonna be a joke coming from you guys, who, if they were in this room and saw that taco, they just reach over and grab it, right? Like that social rule does not exist for them. Exactly, right? So, exactly.
Look really good.
So that's a fun little experiment to illustrate some of the challenges. But let me tell you how it can play out in real life for some of our kids. I have an adult client that I've known since he was 8 years old. He's now 30 years old. But when he was about 17 or so, he used to go to the YMCA to go swimming with his grandma. This kid at 17 looked like a full-grown man, 200 pounds, hairy face, looks like a man, right? But developmentally, he's 3 or 4 or 5 maybe, right? And so grandma can't go in the men's locker room with him and get him changed into his bathing suit. He has to go by himself. And usually that's just fine. He knows the routine and he knows how to get changed, and that's fine. But he doesn't understand the social rules, right? So one day he walks into the men's locker room and he sees 2 little boys, 7, 8 years old, and he stops and he starts talking to them. Are you going swimming? I like your bathing suit. I love swimming. Do you like swimming? Right? Here's a guy who looks like a full-grown man talking to little boys. What do you think those little boys did? They freaked out. They wanted to talk to their moms, right? And so what's that behavior look like, though, to us? Right? It makes us ask questions about, is this a creepy dude, right? And so all of a sudden that kicks off an emergency for this grandma where she's trying to explain to the YMCA staff and these parents, like, look, I know it looks like this, but actually my son or my grandson doesn't understand that social rule. What's the social rule? When you walk into a locker room and you see little boys in the locker room.
Avoid them.
Yeah, they don't exist, right? You walk on by them, you do your business, you don't stop to chat with them, right? Period, end of story. So because my student didn't understand those social rules, he made this mistake that was interpreted in sort of a nefarious way, right? So this is I do a lot of law enforcement trainings, and this is one of the things I bring up to them, is like, look, if you know you're having an interaction with someone on the spectrum, and they've done something that looks a certain way, you got to ask yourself the question, is this really about a social taboo or a social rule? And look at it from that perspective, and you might get a different answer, right? Because automatically people are like, that's a pedophile, that's a creepy dude, right? Yeah. Yes.
Not having personal intervention with people that have autism, especially older people.
Yeah.
When they get older, bigger, angry, physical, do you have those issues at your school? How do you deal with those? I mean,
absolutely. So we have kids and adults who have really big behavioral profiles. So we expect that young children, 2 to 3, will spill over sometimes emotionally and have a tantrum and that kind of stuff. But we also expect that as kids get older, that they're going to figure out how to regulate themselves and how to communicate that they're upset in a more socially appropriate way. But many of our students don't do that, and they can tantrum, and it's scary to see a 220-pound, 18-year-old boy having a tantrum like a little 2-year-old, right? They can be extremely physical and so on. Our philosophy at Morgan Center is that we don't restrain kids, because some of these people are so strong and big. There's just no reason to physically get involved, right? So our rule essentially is we always stay positive, we always interact positively. We never get mad at kids. We never yell at kids because that usually escalates the situation. We always try to give them support, but if a student's having a hard time, we might give them some space and time. So let them have their moment, tell them that we're there to support them, let them get through it, and then hopefully on the backside, we'll be able to support them and get them right back into their routine without a big conversation about, their tantrum and that kind of stuff. Now, there are times when there are dangerous situations and we might have to escort a student, so from one place to another. Luckily, our campus is a really great space. It has all this outdoor area, so I might escort a student, I just did it the other day, escort a student out to a playground where he can continue his tantrum without hurting himself or others. Yeah, that's the idea.
So I'm happy to hear that you guys are working, like, for example, with San Jose Unified.
Yeah, we have. We're not currently, but Santa Cruz currently. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm curious, do you work with or have you reached out to any of the law enforcement agencies to help educate them?
Yeah, so I train 600 plus officers a year.
Oh,
Yeah,
fantastic.
on autism. So I do a 2-hour Autism 101 class for officers on they do something called CIT, which is crisis intervention. Are you an officer or a former
No,
officer?
I'm just
Yeah.
familiar with it, but yeah.
Yeah, so, and I do that on a kind of monthly basis right now. And we educate up to 600 officers per year, just coaching them on interaction and, hey, give space and time, try not to go hands-on,
Yeah.
What to look for, how to support, all of those kinds of things. Yeah.
Do you ever do that to fire people too?
Sometimes we'll get a mixed group, so sometimes we'll get custody involved. We've done some EMTs and fire people, but for the most part, it's officers and custody. Custody, this is a problem in custody, right? Is sometimes people with special needs, with autism, are taken into custody and thrown in with the general population where they're bullied and mistreated and people misinterpret them and it's bad. So to give them a little training on that is really important.
So I had a comment and then a question. So,
Is the
Bob
comment
is-
a positive comment?
No, no, it is. Bob is,
Good question.
No, it's
Good question.
No, but so we go, I've gone now my second time, and Jesse has gone much more than I have, but there's a place, we do physical education with special needs folks.
Friends of children with special needs, yeah.
And there's a guy there, me being familiar with that community, there's a guy there, I walked in and I was like, ooh, this could be a situation.
Yeah.
Because he's a big boy, and if something happened, there's not a single thing that anybody in that room, even Bob with his special techniques and restraining everything, he would kick all of our asses for the body.
Yeah,
I would just say
absolutely.
that. So people don't understand that. But with that, and I think with that being said, here's the question. So and I don't know, I remember the movie Rain Man. Was he autistic? Because I don't think that may have been people's first image of,
You're right.
hey, what's autism, right? And then one of my favorite movies, I think the guy was autistic, is Love Actually, where there's a gal and her brother, she goes and checks him all the time.
Yeah.
But he does get physically violent. I mean, he does get physically violent towards her and just in general. So it's like, how do we know as just a community that's not familiar with anything? It doesn't seem like we have very much exposure to the behavior of who that person is.
So
what's going on.
Yeah, you're really right. And unfortunately, when that's one instance where some maybe behavioral challenges were portrayed in the media or in film or whatever, of someone who had some bigger physical challenges. Yeah. Usually it's a super smart, quirky person who loves penguins, or it's in Hollywood, we don't get to see the other side of autism, sort of the bigger challenges that I see on a day-to-day basis. And so part of our mission is to make sure that we are talking to law enforcement and others and inviting people to our campus to have interactions and go out and do things in the community. Because it used to be, when I was younger, I thought, this is for our kids, this is for our kids, this is for our adults. Actually, the opposite is true. It's for the community. It's for people to be exposed. So, we can only do so much, but we're trying. Yes?
And with that being said, I mean, is now autism, is it on the back burner? Because I used to see the little puzzle pieces, Autism Speaks all over, there used to be like stuff, and now it doesn't really seem like you see that much of it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I used to see people all the time walking around with these blue puzzle pieces.
The
It's just-
symbol
I
for
think,
the
I
autism.
think they just
Autism
haven't printed
speaks.
those stickers in a while or something. I mean, it's still, so you asked a question earlier about where did we start and where are we now? Incidence right now is 1 in 50 births will result in a diagnosis of autism. When I started, it was more like 1 in 400 or even less than that. So the reality is the incidence of autism keeps on increasing. Yes, we have gotten better probably at diagnosing those higher functioning people who are, very capable in many ways, but there's also an increase in autism for those individuals, like the people that I serve. So, yeah.
Why?
I've seen,
I don't, if I had that, I don't know. So I was telling Karen earlier, there's all kinds of theories, but no one has figured it out. And my guess is that we'll land on the idea that there are multiple ways people can end up with a
Hereditary.
diagnosis of autism. It seems though that there is maybe a genetic predisposition in certain families. I have a family that has 3 kids on the spectrum for instance. I have another family with 2 kids on the spectrum. If you have a child with autism, the likelihood that your next child is going to be diagnosed goes up. So there's some genetic component there. We're not sure what. And then there may be something that's triggering autism. Maybe in utero or whatever, but I'll give you an example of this family on my campus. The mom is my age, so she's born in '68, right? And before she was born, her mom had multiple miscarriages over and again. But that was right at the time when these anti-miscarriage drugs were coming online, right? And so her mom took these anti-miscarriage drugs. And of course the thinking then, and if you're not thinking deeply about it, your assumption would be, I'm giving this mother this shot and it's going to help her carry this kid to term, right? And it did. But the reality is when the mother received that shot, not only did the mother receive that drug, but the baby in utero received that drug, and the baby's egg material received that drug. So with one shot, you're hitting 3 generations of people, right? I don't know that that's a cause or could be a contributing factor, but there are things like that, these environmental things that we're not thinking about and may be part of the answer eventually.
can I also, so I know 2 people that, as I'm consciously thinking, and I know of at least 2 people that are autistic. One was my neighbor, and he was on the side of people that you would help,
Okay.
right? The
So
stuff-
big
the stuff.
challenges.
Big challenges,
Yeah, okay.
and they would always talk with them and say, say hello, Sean, say hello, right? So all those things. I was always amazed, always enamored by their attention to detail and what they did. And then the second one is a very good friend of mine who's her daughter is in high school, and she's in band, and band has a lot of sensory things.
Yeah.
And when she gets overwhelmed, they created a process or a plan for her that she would sit in a corner and rock and just soothe herself. And I thought,
That's really great.
and I remember walking, and I remember listening to students around me, and I'm like, hey, is that, so-and-so? And they said, oh, yeah. And then the students would walk in, and they go, oh, don't worry about it. She's just doing her thing. She'll join us in a minute.
Yeah.
Like, the students seem
That's
to be
really
so
great.
much
Yeah.
more,
Yeah.
like, oh, that's what she just does. And she'll join
That
us.
part is super important, right?
Yeah.
Because most kids, public school kids, don't get to see the kids that I work with. So we actually also have a program that we call reverse mainstreaming, where we invite their private school kids. They seem to want to partner with us more than public school kids for programs for some reason. We invite private school kids to come in and visit our kids on campus. Now, COVID has changed that a little bit, but we'll get back to it eventually, where we have these kids visit us on a weekly basis, and they get to have interactions with our kids with those bigger challenges and just kind of see and understand. And then I do a lot of training with those kids as well. Yes?
Another question, I was talking to you before.
Yeah.
Jesse and Tim helped
Yep.
me. And we have a doctor working with us because we do the physical therapy.
Yeah.
We do the best we can, but what we're seeing is the clients go home and they basically sit and watch TV all day. They don't do anything physical. How do you overcome that with the parents, or do you?
That's a hard one. So, yeah, I agree with you. So physical activity to me is really important in not just for overall health, but also with like emotional regulation, right? You got to have an outlet, and these kids really need it. But they're not motivated like me and you when we were kids to do better or run faster or do those
Play
things.
with their friends.
Yeah, right. So getting them involved is really hard. And so at our school, we try, not always successfully, but we try to find activities that are going to be intrinsically sort of motivating for them. So we have a bicycle program. We've taught almost all our kids to ride bikes. It's something they can do be autonomous with. They can ride, or we have a big course on our campus where they ride bikes in circles and get a little exercise. It's fun, right? There's something about it that is like, oh, that feels really good. It's freedom.
Our clients, and you tell me if I'm wrong, I don't think they ride a bike. They can
You would say the same about ours. Guess what?
Yeah,
They can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have trikes, we have tandems, we have all these different, you're totally right. Most of them have not been taught, but as soon as they come to us at a young age, hopefully they come at a young age, they're harder to teach when they're older, but we will teach them how to ride a two-wheeler because we know that that's helpful. We do things like yoga and, we try group games and things like that, but finding things that they like is really important because, we can talk about autism all day. We're only scratching the surface here, but quite often people with autism are not socially motivated in the same ways a neurotypical person. Yeah, we do stuff to please our bosses and our spouses and our friends and our bosses. I mean, I said bosses twice. But the point is we're here to please you, right? And we do all kinds of things that we don't really want to do just to stay out of trouble, including run 3 laps for our PE teacher or whatever, right? And that in itself pushes us to do things that are good for us, right? These individuals, not so much, and so you've got to find those things that are interesting to them and figure out how to get them to engage with them. And it's a chore, believe me. It's not easy.
Well, it's not easy for the parents. I couldn't imagine it being easy for
And the parents are usually, remember, these kids, especially the kids that I serve in, it sounds like you are serving as well. These are 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week care responsibilities. Some of these kids don't sleep at night, right? They're up partying in their rooms all night, and the parents, you look at them and their eyes are like this, and they're just, if my kid's sitting in the front of the TV doing nothing and is quiet for 10 minutes, that feels really good for a lot of our parents. And so they don't have the resources all the time because they're literally exhausted to do that. Now, of course, we have some parents who are really good and push and understand from when their child is very young that they have to set up routines, and if they get those routines started at a young age, they will serve the family for that child's life.
You don't house anyone overnight.
No, I like to sleep at night.
Yeah.
And I
parents.
still don't sleep at night.
Yeah.
Now, there are a lot of parents who would love us to have a residential component, but that's actually a little scary for me. I already, it's already a big responsibility to care for these individuals for as long as we do during the day. So, yeah.
You didn't even get off your first slide. Is there anything?
I don't need it. Did I need it?
He said he wasn't going to be tied.
I knew good there. I knew that. Well, let's go through it real quick.
Let's see if we haven't covered anything.
I'll say this about relationships, right? It can be really hard. People make the mistake sometimes of believing that individuals with autism don't want to have relationships and want to be left alone. That's not my experience. My experience is actually they really do, but they don't understand the dance, right? So when we think about a functioning relationship, there's this back and forth that happens. I do something nice for you, you do something nice for me. I say something nice about you, give you a compliment, you do the same for me. At some point, you don't have to do it in that moment, right? But there's this dance that we do I ask you out to go do something, you ask me out to go do something. There's this thing that happens when we're in a functioning relationship. You guys have all, I'm sure, been in relationships over the course of your lives, whether it's love or friendship, whatever, where you're doing all the work, right? Anyone ever been in that relationship before?
Yeah,
What happens to that relationship?
Did you say you were in that now?
I said, yeah, a lot.
What happens to that relationship?
It
dies. It dies on the vine, right? Because you are getting a message that person's not into it, right? People with autism quite often really do want to have those relationships, but they don't get that reciprocity, that emotional reciprocity that really has to define relationships. And so it can be hard for them to hold on to those relationships.
So that top slide, I was surprised yesterday, there was a girl, there's a little bit of and I don't know if you guys do that, there was a little bit of an issue with one girl's feelings were hurt, and another girl, and two of my kids did baby sign language, and all of a sudden she's doing like the sign for sorry, and I'm like, that's pretty incredible, like right now. So do you teach that kind of stuff? Like, because if they can't speak nonverbal, they go like, thank you, or whatever?
Oh yeah. So we use sign language all the time.
Yeah.
A lot of our kids can use sign language, but also those computer devices are really helpful. Yeah. Those devices are amazing. So I started.
This is a more modern development.
Yeah. I started 30 years ago when we didn't have these things, and the change is drastic.
So you have the device now.
Yeah.
You actually can have a conversation
That's right.
that people didn't think was possible.
That's right. It's pretty.
So now
amazing.
you're realizing, oh, okay, wait, we've been.
There's
I won't say
in
we've
there.
been wrong all these years,
Yeah.
but
There's often a lot in there. Some of our kids are really at a very basic level, like I have to use the bathroom, but then you have those other kids who are like, what color is your favorite? What food do you like? Where do you live? They're asking questions that they would not have been able to ask years ago. So it's really encouraging. And frankly, I hate technology. This is the best use of technology I've ever seen, right? Yeah.
So, about you, how did you get involved in this kind of education?
Good question. I'm a high school English teacher. No. So I thought I was going to be a high school English teacher, and I had a friend who worked here. And I subbed 1 year, and I just liked it. That's it. Yeah.
But you had a teaching credential on the whole 9 years.
Yeah. Then I had to go get my special ed credential, and then I was a teacher. That's what I am, is a teacher that's sort of transitioned. Yeah.
I mean, how do you rescue crocodiles?
I don't.
There's a story there.
So in my bio, I'm of the, thank you for that. In my bio, I put that line at the very end just to see if anybody reads it. So you win the prize. Yeah. So, yeah. It's like all about my professional life, and then at the end it says something like.
You go to.
No, I know. Yeah, I should have come up with.
Alligators.
Yeah, I was just messing around.
The authenticity of your hug.
Yeah, so I have been at Morgan Center for 30 years. This is actually my last year at Morgan Center. I'll probably stay connected to the
Are you
program.
retiring or?
In air quotes, I have to do something, but it's time. I have an incredible team of people who are coming up through the ranks, and it's time for me to go do something else. I love the ocean, so I'm hoping to do something maybe with an ocean-minded nonprofit or something like that.
One other thing, you were talking about kids going for half a day and what, collapse of the Highway 92.
Yeah.
What happened to those kids during the time, or adults? Did they just not?
Highway 17 is closed.
Yeah, so, during COVID, we had to do crazy things to make it work. There was a period of time where we were delivering services virtually only. We came up with a really great program, but it was still really hard for our parents because our children really need a one-on-one aid all day. And guess who was the one-on-one aid at home? Mom or dad. And they have jobs too that they're trying to do. So it was a really difficult time. We haven't seen as much problems with like the collapse of 92 and that kind of stuff, but certainly traffic can be a problem for some of our kids.
But these kids are traveling an hour and a half to get here.
Sometimes,
hour and a half.
yeah, sometimes.
And the parents on top of that.
Yeah.
And that bus ride or whatever.
Yeah, it's a bus ride.
That's got to be challenging unto itself. itself.
Oh, boy, yeah, you're absolutely right. And we have kids who really can't sit in a bus very well, so they're in a harness where it's clipped here and here, so they can't get out of it because some of these kids would just get up and start, doing whatever they want on the bus. So not all of them. Some can sit in a seatbelt and it's fine, but it can absolutely be a challenge. This happens to be the best solution for those children possible. So that's why they ended up with us. It's never perfect, unfortunately. Yeah.
Are most people diagnosed fairly early in their life? Oh, I guess it's the extreme of the spectrum would make it easier to diagnose, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
And then.
Yeah, so that's such a great question. I had a guy come to take a tour this morning. So we're getting ready for a fundraiser that we do in May. Great segue. We have invites over on the back, in the back corner there if you're interested. But this guy runs, I'm not going to say what he runs because if any of you, I don't want to out him if you know. But essentially, he's helping us with our fundraiser in some small way, but super generous. And he heard about what we were doing, and he came to visit today. And his line of questioning, he's 70 years old. His line of questioning was about him, right? Because he has noticed that he has some differences from people in his life, and he has noticed that his family member, his son, his grandchildren also have some different kinds of challenges, behavior, that kind of stuff. So I would say the answer is a complicated one, right? Of course, there's people of our generation and older who just, they weren't talking about it, right? They're different or whatever. They were never identified. Yeah, they might be quirky. And then you also have really young kids who maybe are in a socially advantaged position where their parents are educated, and if they notice something, they're going to, of course, go and get it figured out. But we also struggle with cultural issues, right? There are some cultures where they don't go to the doctor when they see something different. They don't want to admit it, or they just kind of circle the wagons and protect their family, and those individuals don't always get diagnosed or served.
Those that are on the, side of the spectrum that are minor.
High functioning, yeah.
High functioning,
yeah.
or even, closer to the middle.
Sure.
Do they sometimes get put into programs that they shouldn't because they are functioning enough that if they're, I've seen in schools where the teacher's like, that kid's got to get out of here because he needs special ed. Yeah. Well, the kid didn't need special ed. The teacher didn't want to have to deal with it. Yeah. So do you see a lot of that?
Yeah. So I think, I call those kids the fall through the cracks kids. They sort of like, there's no perfect solution for them. Sending them to a school like mine is not appropriate, right? Because that child actually should be supported in a public school program, right? But maybe they don't quite have the right thing either, and they're just not quite being served, So yeah, there are a lot of people. The spectrum is infinite, they say, right? And there are certainly people like I serve, and they're really high functioning people, but sometimes there's people who need a level of support that just doesn't quite exist. It's hard to find it.
That kind of leads to my point. If it's infinite, then isn't everybody on the spectrum at some
There's
point,
some speculation that we all do. I love surfing, but surfing is like you paddle out, you get away, you paddle out, you get away, you paddle out, you get away. It's repetitive, right? It's we all have, I think, our little things, right?
And how is that different than living a life of COVID and not learning social cues, right? Like not learning how to interact with people, right? So, I don't know, I have all these questions. But you answered them really well.
I think there's a lot of, I think there are a lot of kids right now who missed 3 years of development in a way during COVID. And frankly, I'm going to sound so old right now, but we have a lot of employees who are younger people. And I'll walk into the lunchroom and they're all on their phones. They're sitting right next to each other. They could be talking to each other, but they're not, right?
So that's not autistic.
No,
that's a cultural behavior.
we're losing a little bit of those social skills. I feel, right?
You see people at the baseball game and they're there and the game's going on.
Yeah.
Can't drop my phone.
Yeah, you're going out to dinner with
Spending all this
your
money.
wife and you're
Yeah,
sitting
yeah,
at
yeah.
the thing,
That's-
not talking to each other. It's
How
probably-
much, well, I could ask it in a way that would elicit your opinion, but how much training is there with the school systems, the school teachers, the school administration to
Yeah.
identify and, participate? Like if you get just a normal when you got your teaching credential, maybe it's not modern, but in a modern teaching credential syllabus, is there anything covered or any part of that touches on identifying and?
It's come a long way. When I got my special ed credential, I think it was a chapter in one book about autism. That was it. So really, all of the training that I received was when I landed at Morgan Autism Center and got it in real time, and of course had to do some studying and so on. But I have. I taught at Santa Clara University. I taught an Autism for Teachers classroom. I had a whole semester-long class on autism. So they're getting more of that.
And, sorry, I keep asking questions. Are most younger identified in the school or by their doctor? Or you don't know?
Typically, so we don't see kids until they're age 5. At our school, we don't see kids until age 5. They're already clearly identified. No one comes to us and says, wow, I think my child has some differences. Can you look at them, right? They're clearly identified by the time they get to us. So usually they will, have been identified at an early age. Yeah.
Is that considered?
I love that you guys are asking so many questions.
I know, we're totally
I
over our
love
time.
it.
I don't
I
know
love
if
it.
we've been
I'm totally cool with it.
We're
If
totally
you guys are
ignorant.
cool with it.
Or does Social Security consider a disability? And if so, at what level? I mean, if you have a child that has, 10, another child has 1, and they're looking for benefits from Social Security or SSI or whatever, how do they break that down? Do you have any idea?
This is not an area of expertise, but I will say that our adults usually do receive SSI, but it's usually their own SSI. It's not coming through their parents, right? And so, in fact, someone asked about jobs. Like, if they make X number of dollars, they don't qualify for that SSI support. So it's a terrible situation where it's almost better if they don't have a job because then they get more support.
It's a huge issue at SCSN because they do have people working, and there are a lot of clients that maybe are capable, but they don't because then they lose their SSI.
Yeah, it's a total nightmare. It doesn't make any sense.
You lose.
Are they getting support, a decent amount of support through the regional center?
Typically, yeah. I mean,
Like a big chunk
certainly
of it.
the adults that I'm serving do, and we didn't even touch on this, but a lot of our kids do live with their families. Some of our younger kids with the really big behavioral challenges, or we have kids who will walk out their front door and just put themselves in really dangerous situations. So a lot of these kids will end up in what are called group homes, and so they're in a residential kind of situation, and our adults as well. And one of my challenges with our families who have adults is to start talking to these parents early before they get to a certain point in their lives where they're going to start having medical emergencies of their own, so that they can get their adult child with special needs into a living situation that's going to support them. Because we've had instances where a family, their best plan is, I'm going to keep this kid forever, and then all of a sudden they have a heart attack and it kicks off this emergency and they have to be, oh my God, I'm so hungry. Don't you touch those. I will slap your hand.
I think, how about if we wrap it up and say thank you.
Guys, I really appreciate it.